Board member, I've also come to appreciate how leaders can model behaviors and values to create culture, and we have a great culture here at Bronxville. In 2014, our community, faculty, staff, leadership, parents, and students created the Bronxville Promise as a codification of what we value as a community and what we wish for in our young people: engaged citizenship, critical thinking, innovation, and leadership. 3 years later, in 2017, Dr. Roy Montesano joined our community. And in his nearly 6 years with us, he has showed us what it means to live the Bronxville Promise. Roy's modeling of engaged citizenship has been on display most recently through the advisory committee sessions he has run last year and this year. He has encouraged and he has insisted on constructive dialogue, and just as importantly, listening to each other on complex topics around DEI and how and when it is taught to our children. He will speak more about the outcomes of this committee later tonight, but one observation that I would make about my experience with this committee is that in some ways, the outcomes were less important than the process. We have heard from some community members that there's a desire for more forums like this where we can come together and talk about issues less formally, and we thank Roy for modeling how it can be done. Roy has demonstrated innovation and the willingness to take risk, being out ahead of the pack. During the pandemic, supported by a former board member's legal research and expertise, Roy took advantage of the empty building to accelerate completion of our last big capital improvement project: the high school entrance, the guidance suite, the nurses suite, etc. He has also been a champion of making spaces more student-centered. We will benefit for years to come for Roy's innovative thinking in this area. It's hard to imagine a situation where critical thinking was more important than during the pandemic. The volume of information, the constantly changing landscape, the listening that he did when community members had questions about policies, masks, testing, etc. There was often pressure to react and to pivot quickly, which Roy sometimes chose to do, and sometimes he asked for patience from us. Ultimately, the judgments that Roy made got our community through this historic event safely. As a leader, Roy would tell you that his team was responsible for all of these accomplishments. Dr. Kecke for the new curriculum timelines that have provided clarity to the advisory committee and to the community, Assistant Superintendent Dan Carlin and former board member Tom Curran, and others like Jen Russo on the facilities committee for getting the building projects done during the pandemic. Dr. Rachel Kelly for stepping up as our COVID coordinator, and the principals and the faculty, of course, for bringing our new student-centered spaces, for bringing them to life. The Bronxville Promise defines leadership as embodying compassion, courage, and a quality underrated in this day and age, humility. Working without the need for credit or praise and treating others as equals by allowing for shared decision-making. Roy has modeled leadership for us through humility and strength. We know that you don't need the credit, but tonight we celebrate your service to our community, your modeling of our values, and we look forward to celebrating you again next Thursday, December 22nd, in the auditorium atrium, where there will be a special announcement and recognition of you at the event. So with that, the board would like to present you with a small token of our appreciation. Connie and your team helped us come up with this.
Thank you so much.
And I just want to give you a round of applause.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. That was very nice. Do I have to go next Thursday?
You have to go next Thursday, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So on to the minutes. We have a lot of minutes to approve here. We have the special meeting in November, special meetings of November 14th, December 3rd, the 4th, and the 6th, and the regular meeting from last November 17th. Are there any comments or changes, questions about the minutes? Could we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And I think we are ready for the risk assessment presentation, Dan.
Are they on there? Let's see who's here. Great.
As many of you know, our district is audited by several entities. We have the New York State Controller comes in every 5 years for a complete audit. We've been audited by FEMA when we were awarded funding for flood mitigation. We're periodically audited by the New York State Education Department of Facilities, and we're audited annually by the Bonadio Group, an independent auditor who last month presented our financial statements with an unqualified opinion. We are also audited twice monthly by a claims auditor, Tobin and Company, who audits each check and wire transfer we make. And then finally, we are audited by Acume Partners, who annually assesses the board's risk as far as internal controls are concerned, and then conducts a focused audit on a different specific area of risk every year. With us tonight, I believe, are John Purvis, Pedro Diaz de Leon, and Tim Walter from Acume Partners. And they're going to review their risk assessment update and propose a focus area for auditing in the new year after reviewing the same with the audit committee this past week. So with that, I guess I'll kick it back to you, John.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Good evening, everybody. Apologies first for, apologies first for not being on site tonight. I hope to join you in person. And coming down from Ulster County, unfortunately, the weather got pretty messy here this afternoon, so decided to dial in instead. But maybe I'll share my screen, if that's okay.
Sure.
Can everybody see those slides?
Yep.
Okay. Terrific. Well, thank you, everybody, for your attention this evening. My name is John Purvis, the Manager of Internal Audit for Acume Partners by Cherry Becker. I'm also joined on the call by my colleagues Pedro Diaz de Leon, our Executive Director, and one of our audit managers, Tim Walter. Really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to present our risk assessment update and our recommended 22-23 audit plan. As the district internal auditor, our primary responsibility is twofold. One is to assist the board in ensuring that the district risks are identified, and secondly is to provide the board and the administration with a systematic risk assessment process to ensure that appropriate controls are in place to mitigate those risks. We were on site at the Bronxville School during late October to conduct our risk assessment updates. During that time, we interviewed about a dozen or so district staff and board members that are responsible for the district's major functional areas, processes, and controls. The purpose of those meetings was to confirm our understanding of those processes and controls and to determine if any changes have taken place in our previous assessment. I thank the administration and the board members again for their time and their candor in sharing their thoughts about district operations, perceived risks, and the overall control environment within the district. In addition to the input provided during our interviews, we also consider qualitative and quantitative factors such as materiality to the financial statements, the adequacy of policies and procedures, staffing and organizational changes within the district, and how those changes could potentially impact the control environment. During our risk assessment, we assign a risk rating to each of the functional areas relative to the financial and operating environment, information technology, internal controls. We also consider governance and compliance factors. During our risk assessment update, we'll contemplate any changes to the board or administration, changes to priorities, resource limitations, other organizational changes in any functional areas, and we consider the recency and the results of previous audit. As you can see, there's a large number of factors that we contemplate and weight during our risk assessment update, which are then utilized to recommend the next audit area to target. Would also like to point out that we, in addition to this presentation, we also summarize our risk assessment results in a more formal report that has already been shared with the board. Slide provides us with some background information about risk itself. We define risk as the internal and external factors that threaten the achievement of the district's mission, goals, and objectives. And when quantifying risk, it's important to distinguish and understand the difference between inherent and residual risk. Broadly, think of it as a mathematical equation. We have residual risk, and that equals inherent risk minus the impact of any controls that are implemented. Inherent risk is the level of risk in place before any mitigating actions are taken to alter the risk potential impact or likelihood of impeding an organization's achievement of its goals and objectives. Residual risk is the remaining level of risk after the organization has developed and implemented controls to address those risks. For example, if we think of payroll or purchasing, the inherent risk rating for most districts will be relatively high because of the financial significance or the materiality of the function. And because of the perceived higher inherent risk, one would anticipate there to be a more robust internal controls around those areas to mitigate the inherent risk and reduce the residual risk. Another factor that impacts the risk rating is the design of internal controls. Our risk assessment process isn't designed to test and evaluate the operational effectiveness of the internal controls. However, our methodology does include the identification of internal controls, as well as functional areas such as inadequate segregation of duties or had insufficient policies and procedures that would create more residual risk. The ultimate goal of the district is to effectively manage the risk in all functional areas through the implementation of a system of internal controls designed to ensure that errors, irregularities, and fraud are less likely to occur or go undetected. So here you can see the results of our risk assessment update. In performing our risk assessment, we categorized the district into 9 functional areas that you can see on this slide: budget and financial, revenue and HR, HR and payroll, IT, student services, to name a few. We then utilize a rating methodology that takes into account 16 different quantitative and qualitative factors such as policies and procedures, financial materiality, operational changes, employee knowledge and training, internal controls, laws and regulations. Based upon our understanding of the inherent and residual risk, we then rank each of the 16 factors on a high, medium, and low scale to arrive at a composite risk rating for each of the functional areas. It's important for me to point out here that these are residual risk levels that we're talking about. So they represent the perceived risk after considering the internal control environment. You'll note here that we didn't identify any changes in the risk level of any of the 9 functional areas. Our previous risk assessment update was conducted in the spring of 2022. So this was pretty much as expected. There have been very few process and control changes within the district since our last risk assessment update in the spring. So with that being the case, we're recommending that our 2023 internal audit focus should be on facilities and capital assets. As we noted on the previous slide, facilities and capital assets is an area we deem to be medium risk, and this is an area that we haven't audited since 2016, 2017. And that was prior to the capital improvements referendum that was approved in 2018. Since that time, the district has undergone and performed significant site improvements and repairs, in addition to undergoing numerous infrastructure renovations, repairs, and enhancements. And focus or scope of our audit will be to review the adequacy of key operational, administrative, and financial controls related to the operation and management of campus facilities. We'll also tend to evaluate district policies, procedures, and practices relating to contract formation, contract administration, and contract monitoring functions as they relate to the capital and construction process. We felt as the district is contemplating moving forward with their next capital improvement plan, this would probably be a good time to review the existing facilities and capital asset control environment. You know, we're at a time of rising construction and other costs, rising interest rates. So we felt it would be advantageous for the district to display that there are solid controls in place to manage any future facility and capital projects they might undertake. Slide, we try to dive a little deeper into our audit scope, hope to give you a bit of flavor for the types of activities and documents we'll be looking to examine during our audit. We think about the contract bid process. The idea would be to select a sample of bids from previous projects, to determine if the district is adhering to and is compliant with its purchasing policies, including the handling of envelopes, the level of board involvement, if necessary, contractor payments. We would anticipate we would review the procedures in place within the district, ensure that construction or contractor claims for payment are supported by sufficient documentation, they adhere to the contract provisions, and they're appropriately approved. Contract changes, change orders. During construction, we often see there's change orders as the project moves on and new things are found. If we find change orders, we would try to test a sample of those, determine if they were properly prepared, reviewed, and signed by the appropriate parties. Again, supported by the appropriate documentation, potentially certified by the superintendent and approved by the board if necessary. We would take a look at contract monitoring. We would review the agreement between the board and any construction management firms, gain an understanding of the monitoring and reporting requirements for the project, and then evaluate those reports, meeting minutes, other documentation that might be utilized in the monitoring process. And then the overall capital project procedures, there we're talking about looking at kind of back office administration. So the adequacy of and compliance with board and departmental policies and procedures relating to accounting, budgeting, administering, managing, and monitoring of capital projects. So that really would be the scope focus of our upcoming audit to be done sometime in the early part of 2023. This concludes our presentation. I'd like to thank you once again for your time. If there's any questions or concerns about our risk assessment process or our planned 23 internal audit around facilities and capital assets, I'd be happy to address them at this time.
So we We heard this report in audit committee, and we talked about it, and we had some follow-up after that even, when we got some more detailed information. So will this audit take place again in March?
Yeah, it'll be in the spring. We'll probably get started February, March, John, you think, in that range, and be concluded by June?
That sounds good, if that's good for you guys.
Yeah.
Does it make sense maybe to hear the results, like, before the June meeting, if they're available? Or does
Yes, the plan would be that they'd be available before the June meeting.
Okay. And when was the last time we audited the facilities area?
I think it was about 5, 6 years ago, I think, right, John?
2016, 2017 school year was the last time we did it. It's been a while.
And I'm sorry, you may not be prepared for this question, but were there any findings from that audit of the area that we expect to address again?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure specifically. However, I will say that I don't believe there were any big causes for concern or anything, very detrimental that was identified during the audit.
Yeah, there were no findings.
Or their nature.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If you look at the, kind of the 9 areas that you characterize medium, low, how do you benchmark that against maybe other districts? Is this good, bad?
We really don't benchmark against other districts. However, I would say that, we don't have any levels that rose to the level of high risk. And I'd also like to point out, in the full report that was shared with the board, there are levels between medium, low, high. So medium, basically the aggregate risk score is between 130 and 170. So you could be on the lower end of medium or the higher end of medium. And this is about where you would expect most districts to be.
Do districts tend to have a high in one of these areas? Risk?
I can't say specifically. My brief experience with Bronxville has been that you have a lot of senior tenured people that have been there for quite a long time, have a strong control environment in place, so that's why there aren't anything that rose to the level that we would deem to be high risk here.
John, let me ask that question another way, perhaps. Are there areas in the upcoming March audit that you, based on your experience doing this for years, would like to see Bronxville improve in these 9 specific criteria?
Having not performed any of these audits recently, I wouldn't want to speak to that. The focus of this audit will be around utilities and capital assets, and as we dig into that and perform our audit, that would be the hope, is to identify, potential risks or opportunities for the improvement within facilities and capital assets.
Are there any more questions?
So with that, there's a resolution to accept the risk assessment update, and then also assign the focus area of internal audit to facilities and capital assets.
Can we get a motion?
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Dan.
Have a good evening, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. And Susan, thank you for your very kind and embarrassing words. I appreciate that very much. But you're right, it is about our team and about what we have here, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Before I get into the advisory committee summary report, there's one thing I do want to bring up, and that is the incident that we had last week with our boys varsity basketball team. And, I've been asked about it a few times, and I am preparing to send out a letter to the community tomorrow that I'm going to read tonight as well, that I think summarizes the experience and hopefully will counter any rumor mill that are out there about the actual events. So if you indulge me just for a moment, I'd just like to share the letter that I do plan on sending out tomorrow. Last week, we had an experience and ultimately an important learning opportunity with our boys' varsity basketball team. Prior to the scheduled game with the LaFell School, one of our players posted to social media about the upcoming game and, in extremely poor judgment, used a Kanye West song as the backdrop to the post. As you may be aware, Kanye West has recently been associated with several anti-Semitic statements, and as such, any use of his music sends a message that is inconsistent with our values and teachings. The Bronxville school community stands united against all acts of hatred. The school will not and has not shied away from addressing concerns in this area swiftly, thoughtfully, and in developmentally appropriate ways for our students. To that end, when we were made aware of this post by the LaFell School's administration, we quickly decided to forfeit the game. While that was an appropriate first step, the important teaching opportunity is what came next. The Bronxville High School administration brought the team together to discuss the impact of this post and then decided to bring the team to LaFell to apologize to the coaches and athletes in person. The teams came together at half court, shook hands, and then engaged in conversation. To the credit of the LaFell School, all those present were open to this conversation and accepted our apology with dignity and respect. I also commend our team for not just showing up, but being truly present for this difficult experience. While I think we can all agree that we sincerely regret that this incident occurred, I write to you because I do appreciate the meaningful learning opportunity that has yielded. Accomplished college basketball coach Pat Summit once said, "Accountability is essential to personal growth as well as team growth. How can you improve if you're never wrong? If you don't admit a mistake and take responsibility for it, you're bound to make the same one again." Indeed, I believe our basketball team has reflected on this issue, and this week, students far beyond our basketball team have been talking about what occurred. A key component of the Bronxville Promise is to engage the world, becoming informed about the world being in Bronxville. It is my sincere hope that this experience has served as an example of how the impact, regardless of intent, of someone's words or actions can have a profound effect on others. In closing, I want to reiterate my respect and appreciation for the LaFell School and to commend our high school administration for immediately putting the game aside and seeing their team as student athletes who needed to learn from this experience. Should you have any questions, please contact me. So that's, in a nutshell, I think what happened. It's unfortunate what happened, but I think we have to make a strong stand and statement about any acts of hatred, or whether intentional or not, need to be addressed and cannot be accepted in any way. So this will go out to the entire community tomorrow.
Thank you, Roy.
Sure. I have a couple other things, but I'm going to go right to the advisory committee, please. So a few slides kind of summarizes the advisory committee that has been working for over almost a year. So it was initially established as the results that were brought to our attention within the community about how the district was integrating DEI-related issues into the school environment, including the curriculum. The purpose was to hear various perspectives from constituents, including parents, teachers, students, community members, and administrators, regarding why and how topics related to diversity, equity, inclusion should be woven into the curriculum, school culture, and build upon the strong foundation of the Bronxville Promise, which is our North Star. The charge of the committee initially was to develop a broad-based statement that addresses diversity, equity, and inclusion within the context of the Bronxville community. The committee will further develop a list of recommendations for board consideration. We held 5 meetings starting back in April up until recently in December. Here are the members of the committee. We had a few who dropped off and a few we added on this year, but you can see there are parents, board members, students, administrators, et cetera, who were part of that committee. So some things that we've worked on were, first, to really examine the Bronxville Promise, and from that we're prioritize the promise and look for dispositions, indicators, and outcomes that are already in place that can connect to DEI. And you'll see when we talk about some consensus, there was some agreement that much of what we want for our kids is already contained in the Bronxville Promise. We also used the New York State Culturally Responsive Sustaining Framework to connect to these issues. So in summary, and this is, again, a brief summary of the work that was done, and I will say how much I appreciated the discussions that did occur during those meetings, sometimes more challenging than others, but I think it was important work. So there was no consensus by the group on whether the district should have a separate DEI policy. And again, I would reiterate to this board and what we said to the committee, what came out of this are recommendations for board consideration. We knew they weren't mandates. We knew there was no authority behind it, but we felt important to have recommendations. So we discussed these things. As we note, the policy is not mandated by the New York State Department, and we couldn't come to any consensus whether we should have one or not. There was agreement that much of what we want for our students was already included in our promise, and there was some discussion that suggests we should continue to look into the promise to maybe add some words in there to make some of those things more overt. There was agreement that our students need to be ready for the next stage after they leave Bronxville. And there was consensus that our focus should be on reviewing, updating the district's existing policy on the teaching of controversial issues and review the New York State School Board's sample policy to determine what, if anything, should be revised within that policy. Okay. So this is our current policy. I don't need to read the whole thing, but I point out to you that it was written in 1979 and last updated in 1999. So there was some discussion about that, and while there were some who felt that the policy was good and it was real succinct and to the point, there was other views that, you know what, we need to update this and add some more language into this policy. So we took our current policy and looked at the school board's recommended policy in this area and tried to come up with consensus, if you will, about what to add. Now, interesting, what we did in the advisory committee, we divided ourselves into elementary, middle school, and high school groups. They worked on this over the past couple of meetings and brought it together, and I tried to compile the notes that I was given into what I felt was a consensus from the group, or perhaps one-offs from the group. So we go to the next slide. So I tried to do this best I can. In black, you can see it came from the existing policy that's in place. The red is where I felt there was some level of consensus, at least from most of the people. I'm not going to say it was unanimous, because it wasn't, but from most in the group, that this language should be included in their policy. And in the green was, no consensus really reached, but at least one group felt very strongly about it. So that's why it was included. So in the opening paragraph, the introduction, the language that was asked to be included was from the school board's policy that said the board permits teachers to address controversial topics in schools which are related to the approved curriculum to provide a safe, supportive, inclusive, and structured environment where ideas and viewpoints can be discussed and are appropriate to the developmental level of students. The other part's existing. And then adding language, controversial issues are those which deal with matters about which there are varying levels of opposing or conflicting views, biases, emotions, and/or opinions. These skills are inherent to the disposition of critical thinking that is a cornerstone of the Bronxville Promise. The part where we did not have consensus says issues with no factual basis for controversy are not treated as controversial for the purposes of this policy. So some felt strongly about that, others couldn't agree on it, but it's up there because I felt, at least a group felt it was important. Reading further, and I apologize to reading, but you may not be able to see that from where you are. I can barely see it myself. The board wishes to ensure that controversial issues are presented in a manner that preserves the academic integrity of the district and are of significant interest to the community, have political, economic, culture, or social significance. Again, you note that's in green, meaning there wasn't full consensus. Encourage students to come to their own opinions while respecting the opinions of others and promote inclusivity and dignity for all students. The goal is for students to learn to disagree respectfully and discuss and examine issues rationally, objectively, and thoroughly to enable students to draw informed conclusions and function productively and with civility in our democratic society. Thank you. The board supports its staff in gaining the skills to be fully capable of discussion and presenting controversial topics, which includes successfully guiding students through the process and managing contentious or heated exchanges. The district will provide for professional development and mentoring for teachers, teaching and administrative staff in this area. So that's kind of the intro that was worked on and revised. And then the last part of the procedures part, which follows similarly to our existing policy, but again, you can see there was much added to it. The black part, again, was the existing points of view related to issues being exempt should be fully and fairly presented. When presenting, and then we added, when presenting various positions on a controversial issue, in order for classroom discussion to be rigorous, teachers will take care to balance major views, assure that as many sides of the issue as possible are presented in a fair manner, and not support one position as the only one acceptable. In number 3, there were only two words. One was, the old policy read careful consideration. People felt thoughtful was a better word for that, and equally was added at the end. 4 was taken from our existing policy. Again, at least one group felt strongly about the added language of teachers will present adequate background information from a variety or range of sources so that students can have informed discussions and be able to discuss the issue intelligently. 5, we added, discussions of controversial issues are conducted in a manner that considers students' age and developmental level, similar to the intro. Number 6 was taken directly from our existing policy. 7, at no time may any student be penalized for espousing a personal view on a controversial issue. Grading is based on objective criteria without bias towards students' positions on the subject matter. And finally, teachers should not share their personal opinions about controversial topics, and their main role should be to facilitate a conversation towards norms of civil discourse. So I know it may not seem like a lot of work, those 5 meetings, but I can tell you to get to the point where we are, there was significant discussion that we had in our groups. So these are, again, are recommendations to the board that I hope the board will consider. And I want to, again, thank the members of the committee. I know it was challenging at times, but I appreciated that people showed up and helped us get through this together jointly. It was a good experience, I think, overall.
Yeah, thank you. And again, like, we have heard feedback that people are interested in some sort of a way to continue those conversations, and I just want to add that we hear that suggestion and to be continued.
Great, thank you. I just have, yeah, sure, please.
So I understand that the next step is the board understanding this policy revision to controversial topics and deciding whether or not we want to include both the red and the green.
Or none.
Or none.
You're right.
In addition to determining if we want to have a DEI policy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that ultimately is a board decision.
Ultimately, this is all board decision, yes. Policy decisions are made by the board.
Got it.
These are recommendations to the board.
Got it.
As you heard, we didn't come to consensus about the DEI policy as a group. So that's just something for the board to consider.
Great.
And the other part of that I would just add is that there was discussion about the Bronxville Promise itself, and is there enough in there, or should we add some more to make it a little more robust in that area?
So a couple more comments. Any language that includes that we can call controversial topics, those things that are not based in fact, let's all pause there for a second and think about it, should be considered carefully by all those involved. Because you can throw a lot of things in there.
Yeah.
All of a sudden and call those controversial topics, which means that we're mandating our teachers to teach those things equally. Let's all think about that green language here.
That's right. That's
that
right.
green language is, in my opinion, probably the most important language in there.
It's an interesting comment, because we did discuss that as well, and there was a lot of back and forth about that. So I leave it to the board to mull over.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah,
And, I'll add one more thing. first of all, I've got bronchitis, so if I talk too loudly, I will have a coffee. So trying not to do that. No one can make me laugh because I'll also have a coffee. But the point I want to make here is that this is a great policy document for controversial topics. I view the Bronxville Promise, and I've said this from the second I joined the board, as a mission statement. And the Bronxville Promise does a really good job of guiding us. And I wonder if there's not a way to add some easy language to the Bronxville Promise, and I know that many members of the advisory committee considered that. And that easy, short language could go something like, at the Bronxville School, we strive for academic excellence in everything we do. To that end, we work to create an environment that supports the growth and learning of all students, and where all students feel that they belong. We believe that by respecting diverse ideas and backgrounds, we create an environment where all students can live up to the Bronxville Promise.
Yep.
It feels to me that's an easy add to the Bronxville Promise. Again, mission statement lives here, in my opinion, guys. Policy documents live here. They are meant to be the detail behind the mission statement, in my view. So thank you, guys. I mean, a lot of hard work went into this, I know everyone, so I'm thankful you all did it. Well done.
Thank you. Any other questions on that for now?
Is the committee going to meet again, or is it, this is a result of the committee?
I mean, that's really up to you guys. As you know, I won't be here, Mike, so.
Obviously, you'll be off the committee, okay.
There is at least one member who would like to see the committee continued.
Okay.
And as we explained to the group, that's a decision the board can make, whether you felt it important to continue this particular group, or, as you mentioned, there might be other similar groups to bring together for various things. So I also leave that with you.
Okay.
Just, I'm a giving guy. I just have two other quick things, if you don't mind, Susan, please.
Of course.
The first is a bit of good news. I wanted to share with you that we did receive notification that our high school, we anticipate our high school being nominated for a blue ribbon, following on the heels of the elementary school.
I think that deserves a stop.
Yeah, stop. I extend my appreciation and congratulations to the high school staff, and Ann Myers here tonight to share in that.
For those of us
Yeah.
who aren't exactly familiar with Blue Ribbon, it
Yeah.
sounds lovely, and I know,
It is lovely.
I know the school just got it for the elementary.
Yeah.
What is that exactly?
So it's a federal program where they go about recognizing schools, and generally in two areas. You have to be nominated by the state that you're in. So, for example, we got nominated because of consistently high performance. So that's one category. There's another one that is more growth-oriented. So schools that may be low-performing but showed significant growth over a period of time could also get nominated. So those are kind of the two distinctions. And it involves the entire United States as well as some overseas schools as well. And they go through a process, again, nominated by the state first, based on your performance. And then it goes to the federal level. We have to complete an application, a fairly significant application that Mars is familiar with, on our side for review. And assuming that gets the proper review, then you are told you're nominated now officially by the federal government for that.
Thank you.
So I had the pleasure of attending the elementary school one in November, and it was, a really nice thing to be at. The assistant secretary of education spoke, and there were representatives from all around our country, and it was quite nice. So, yeah. And finally, I just would be remiss if I didn't say a big thank you for my last board meeting. And as Susan mentioned, after being at over 400 of them, this is kind of bittersweet for me. But I really just want to take a very quick moment to say thank you. Thank you to the current board, past members who provided me the opportunity to lead this wonderful district. It's really been a highlight of my career, and perhaps a good way for me to kind of go off into the sunset. There's nothing like Bronxville. I want to thank our incredible staff, the amazing administrators and teachers who I get to work with, the aides, assistants, support staff, and our B&G staff. The amount of talent that we have here, dedication, professionalism, provided by these people is nothing short of amazing. I've never been around such fabulous people and who really care about the work that we do. Of course, I want to express my appreciation to our parents and community for their support, and to especially our students. What they do daily continues to amaze me. Their accomplishments, you know, I think about when I was in high school, and I'm glad I didn't go to Bronxville, because I would be like, you know, probably on the lower tier there. But what they do on an everyday basis is just truly, truly amazing, and really makes it worthwhile that we put in the work that we do. Thank you very quickly to the leadership folks at Village Hall. We've shared a really nice relationship with our mayor and police chief, and it's really nice to know that they're there when we need them. And while I know it's cliche to say that it takes a village, the reason I believe Bronxville is so special is that everyone is invested in doing what's best for the children in our community. Everyone. And one last shout out to our central office staff, Dan, Mara, Rachel, and our terrific administrative assistance team. We wouldn't be where we are without you. And thank you to everyone who works so hard to make Bronxville the special place that it is. I know the district's in great hands moving forward as Rachel takes over. She is truly the consummate professional, and I've so appreciated her partnership and friendship, so thank you, Rachel. Everybody needs a Rachel, by the way. And my wish for the new year is for Bronxville and our students to continue to do amazing work, and my sincerest best for continued success. And again, thank you for allowing me to be here with you guys. Thank you.
December 22nd.
Oh, that's right. You're up, Isabella.
Hi, everyone. December update from student side. A little arts highlight is we just had our band and orchestra concerts. I heard they went really, really well, and Hello Dolly rehearsals also got kicked off recently. Our winter season is underway, and in the holiday spirit, the SFL is planning what we're calling the Holiday Ball-a-Day next week. It's a 3v3 basketball tournament we had Thanksgiving last year. It's going to be on Thursday to raise money for the club. The freshmen just held their annual Andrus party, which is a party we have for Andrus school children. It's a tradition for the freshman class, and we collect donations of holiday gifts for the kids, and then they hold a party with food, dancing, games, etc. It's a really special thing that we do. Also in that spirit, the BYC is collecting, or the Youth Council is collecting donations and gifts, and we just had them wrapped for the kids at West Hab. And then this Saturday, we're having a party with them at the Reformed Church. For the kids receive a stocking full of gifts, and then they also each receive a gift to give to their parents, which is really special. Freshman Transition is our program with senior mentors for the freshman class. That's been pretty active lately. We've been going to their health classes to talk to them. We did a One Love training session. We did a little talk about like good communication with teachers and such. Another thing with the guidance department is junior workshops are underway. So that's the program with guidance basically all year long for the juniors to prepare them for the college process and just sort of direct them into what they want to do for that. And speaking of college, it's a big time for the seniors. There's a lot of stress right now, but I know a lot of people just got a lot of good news tonight, which is great, and I'm excited to see how everybody else does. Midterms were just announced for the high school, which is something we haven't really had normally for a couple of years now. Last year was like cumulative tests with classes in between, but this year they're real exams with no classes that week, so that should be fun. But luckily break is coming up in a week, and I feel like this part of the year goes by pretty quickly, and the end of the quarter will be here before we know it. So yeah, that's my update.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you.
Dr. Kelly.
Good evening, everybody. I want to start off the top of the agenda this evening with one of the most important acts of a school board, besides hiring a superintendent, and that is awarding tenure. And we have an off-cycle tenure candidate, given that Jackie Diarco, our middle school art teacher, started full-time in the middle of the year. So she is eligible for tenure on January 9th. So I just want to take a moment, given how important this role is, to share a few excerpts from Mr. Macora's tenure recommendation to you, Mr. Macora, our middle school principal. Jackie takes the time to get to know every aspect of every child in her art classes. She is thoughtful in her care of students as well as in her planning of lessons. In that planning, she considers the students' academic as well as social, emotional needs. Jackie is a lifelong learner who is always willing to try new methods to engage students in active learning. She is currently seeking an additional master's degree in art history. Jackie is an educator that makes decisions that are best for the overall child. She facilitates lessons that allow her students to critically think and analyze what they have learned. She is an educator that is not afraid to experiment with new techniques and ideas to meet the needs of all of her students. To walk into Jackie's classroom is to be in a student-centered learning environment. Students are completely engaged in all forms of their learning. Her learning environment is positive and friendly. Jackie started her journey 5 years ago as a part-time elementary school teacher with us. She then had the opportunity to teach grades 6th through 8th full-time. Over the past 4 years, she has worked to redesign curriculum to meet the growing interests and needs of her students. She also has engaged our community by working toward the advancement of the arts in Bronxville. She was a driving force behind last year's district art show. Jackie also facilitates the middle school art club where students enrich their artistic abilities by exploring different techniques. Additionally, she is involved in the Bronxville After School program, as well as is a constant chaperone on our annual trips to Williamsburg. She is truly an educator that lives up to our Bronxville promise. So I'd like you to consider the motion to grant tenure to Jackie Diarco in the area of art, effective January 9th.
And we're voting separately on this one. Okay. Any questions, anyone? Motion, please.
So,
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Congratulations, Jackie.
Congratulations.
And then before you, you have resolutions that include some leaves for some medical leaves, as well as a regular substitute appointment of a high school physics teacher. As discussed in executive session, there are 2 terminations for you to consider this evening, as well as new teacher aide appointments. We also have a civil service appointment of a senior office assistant. We have a revision to a leave that you had approved prior, some days shifted there. And then we have 1 change to our co-curricular stipends. We have a new boys JV lacrosse assistant coach before you this evening, as well as 1 revision to the winter coaching roster. So if you could consider items B through P, please.
Any questions? Can we have a motion?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Rachel.
For the financial report, we'll start out with the current year. There's no real changes from prior month, as things are still looking a little tight on the expenditure side. We're facing some inflationary challenges in transportation, energy, and other contracted areas. I do not anticipate an expenditure deficit for the current year, but it's going to be tighter than usual. And I think the good news is revenues. You know, the Fed just raised again this week. So after not seeing virtually any interest income for almost 10 years, we're starting to collect some interest on our money, which is great. We also are seeing revenues in non-resident student tuition come in higher than budgeted. So that's where our surplus this year is going to be generated, I think, on the revenue side. And I think it's comfortable to say that our traditional $500,000 allocation from fund balance, where we begin the budget process every year, can come from this year's surplus, which is always a good place to start. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
I had a question on the treasurer's report.
Sure.
I know we have plenty of cash, but it's a little lower this November than it was last November. Is that just a timing issue?
It probably has to do with construction funds. You know, we're almost at the end of paying out cash for construction. It's probably wholly related to that.
But then why wouldn't it be higher?
Well, no, they would be lower because we paid out that cash. We had more cash last year.
Yes.
Yeah, so now we have less because the project is just about over.
Okay.
Dan, remind me, what do we invest our cash in?
We're very limited. It's basically either fully collateralized bank interest. You know, our funds with the banks have to be fully collateralized. And then pretty much treasuries or other government instruments. I think it's legal to do things like commercial paper and yeah, it's just not, any yield difference is not worth the squeeze. We don't run an investment fund. You know, we just want to make sure we're diligent about collecting interest on the money we have. So that's pretty much it. And general municipal law dictates that.
Yeah.
But you know, now is the time where we're starting to move into the budget for next year. And I'm finalizing the first draft next week, which will be distributed to the board before the break. And right now, with most pieces in place, it looks like our statutory tax levy cap will be in the 2.3% range. And we're seeing definite budget challenges in health insurance premiums, energy costs, transportation, you know, inflation in general, and you know, the usual salary movement of staff. I would expect the first draft probably to come in above the cap, and then, you know, work with the board and the administration over the next few months to finalize an acceptable budget, most likely below the cap. You know, I think we'll probably be within striking distance after some work. I'm gonna schedule a finance committee meeting when we come back from the break to go over the details of the first draft, you know, a few weeks prior to the January 28th workshop, so we can, you know, get a real head start on addressing, you know, budget issues and budget education and things like that, especially for most of the new board members. And this is old stuff for Mike and Jen, but I think for everybody else, it's either first or second time through.
Great.
And there's no financial action items.
First?
I have a small facilities update. We've begun some very, very minor remodeling work to turn our training room and a coach's room into a much larger training room. If anybody has ever gotten treatment, it's kind of a joke. You kind of line up in the hall on the floor, and then you get to go sit on the table sideways because you can't fit in the room any other way, and because it's mostly taken up by the ice machine. But there's a coach's kind of locker room that we're going to take and turn into a training room, and that's something that our own maintenance staff can do, and probably will be done before we get back from break. It's going to go from 70 square feet to over 250 square feet. to eventually include 3 tables, a bike, a bunch of rehab bands, game-ready machines, hydroxylator.
Where are we taking the space from if we're going from 70 to 250?
Coach's room.
Oh, you said that.
Yeah, there's
Sorry.
They're breaking the wall down
locker
between them.
room it's underutilized.
Okay. And what will the cost be?
Marginal, you know, we have a maintenance worker on staff, and I think Joe's planning to write a foundation grant, you know, to pay
For the equipment?
The equipment.
Yeah, actually, I think it's done.
Yeah. There's a handshake agreement, I think.
Well, no, I heard from Helena McSherry that the foundation actually considered it. You probably know this,
Right.
Michael. And they've approved it. And so I think it's, you know, unfortunately, it was like right at the beginning of this meeting, so we can't consider it tonight. But hopefully, if we vote on it in January, you can get the stuff ordered, and it won't be too
Sure.
delayed.
Yep,
Great.
it is good news.
Yeah, it's a very generous effort by the community to, in memory of Robert McGrath.
Tremendous. And then the facilities committee met last week and reviewed the 5-year plan with our architects. And I think we're going to be ready to present that to the board at some point after the break.
Action item.
Oh,
And
so,
there's an action item. We have a SECRA resolution for the board regarding the outdoor learning spaces. As we're planning on adding 2 outdoor learning spaces over the summer, it's necessary for the board to adopt this resolution regarding the environmental impact of the project. SECRA is an acronym for State Environmental Quality Review Act, and requires the district to consider the environmental impact of all building projects. As this project qualifies as a type 2 action, having little to no impact, the resolution has been prepared for adoption by our board council committee. And if it was a type 1, you know, we'd have to have a public hearing, you know, things of that nature. But this is a type 2, so we just adopt the resolution as written by board council, and we can move forward.
So what exactly are we agreeing to as a board?
a type 2 action.
You're agreeing that this has no, very little to no environmental impact to, you know, move a little dirt around in the backyard and, you know, putting boulders to sit on, things like that nature.
So there was no consultant or anything
That
hired?
was something-
For type 2s, you don't need it, only type
Okay.
1s.
Okay.
Do the architects who did the drawings for the outdoor classroom spaces, do they express a point of view on this?
They're the ones who tell us that they go to your attorney and get a type 2 resolution for this. If it was a type 1, they would lead us through the process of the public hearing and all of that.
Okay, so they advised us
Yes.
that it is a type 2.
Yeah, this is a formality, but legally necessary.
Any other questions? All right, do we have a motion to approve this resolution?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
You want to do the other action?
Sure, we have
Dan?
one other action item. There was originally some confusion. This is a high school French club trip, not an 8th grade trip. Going to Montreal, but it's for 50, up to 50 students, March 16th through 19th, with a projected 12-to-1 student to chaperone ratio. And we've done trips like this in the past, and, you know, it's great to see our kids getting out and, you know, hopefully they'll give Americans a good name and speak some French up in Montreal for us all.
Yeah, it's great to see all these trips coming back. Does anyone have questions about the high school Montreal trip? Can we have a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Merci. Does anyone have anything to report from the committee meetings?
Not beyond what.
Okay. Yeah, so the calendar, we've talked about December 22nd, 5 PM in the auditorium lobby. Our next regular meeting is Thursday, January 19th. And if there's no other board discussion, then we're ready to move to the public comment section. Is there anyone who would like to say anything here at the meeting? Yes, please. If you could stand, that would be great, and if you could just state your name, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rosie Bodio. I'm here to discuss the Instagram incident and more broadly anti-Semitism in our community. Much of what I have to say this evening does echo what Dr. Montesano read to us earlier, but I still feel the need to share this with this group. So in reference to the incident, it was my hope that we would have had a more timely communication. I feel like more than a week to wait, really, the lack of facts leads to gossip and hearsay in our community. And you have to think about this kid, poor kid. He made a mistake. In our world of cancel culture, this could have ruined his life. So this isn't about that, but it's much more about when mistakes are made, it's really important that we learn from them. It's really important that we turn them into teachable moments. Moments where we can reflect on what has happened and reflect on how we can do better as a community next time. Which speaks to my second point. We talk repeatedly about preparing our children for the future, but sweeping things under the rug, not admitting there is a problem, failing to challenge ourselves isn't going to cut it in the evolution of our world. One way to prepare these future leaders is for all of us to be brave enough today to have tough conversations, to be introspective, to be open-minded, and to admit that there is a problem, and ultimately to find reasonable and actionable solutions for these problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Don Brinkle.
Don Bringle. I have two twins in the 8th grade wing. I just had one question, Dan. Was that a high school or high school middle school for the French?
French, it's all high school.
Just
all
high school. Okay. For some reason, my kids were excited. Being middle school, they thought they were going to get the vote. Thank you. You know, I am part of the Superintendent's Advisory Committee, along with many of you who are here tonight. And I wasn't planning on doing this, but I think that, and I don't speak on behalf of the committee, but I just wanted to say that I think all of us who were a member, and you saw that because some came and went, there were quite a few, 30 maybe, that were involved in the committee, and I just wanted to say what a fantastic experience it was for all of us in participating in that committee. And I think when we first walked on board that committee, we had no idea how it was going to be handled. And Roy, meeting after meeting, and between the meetings, handled this in a way that allowed all of us, and if you talk about our original intent was DEI and to discuss that issue, the committee itself, I think, exemplified DEI. We were diverse, we had a lot of equity in terms of our discussions, and we included everybody in those discussions. And as Roy alluded to, they were difficult at times. But I was amazed how we found a way to continue the discussions meeting after meeting. And I think Roy's leadership, and I just would like to thank you, Roy, for all you did,
Thanks, Tom.
meeting after meeting, to keep us engaged, to keep us focused, to keep us moving in a direction that you saw would be profitable. And I just appreciate your involvement in that. I don't know many others who could have done what you did. And you always kept yourself out of it in terms of you kept a balanced moderation of the group. You listened, you were engaged, and I really think that all of us would agree that without your involvement, it would not have gone as nearly as well as it did, and I appreciate that. It was a very positive process, and our original intent, I think we really had the time to discuss it in every aspect. We finished up with the teaching of controversial issues, and I just wanted to discuss my goal in talking to you now as the board is to, and I hope there's maybe two of us, Roy mentioned there was one, but I hope there's at least two, maybe more in this group tonight, who would like to continue this superintendent's advisory committee under the acting superintendent. I think it was a tremendously valuable experience. We covered more than one subject. We covered the Bronxville promise. We covered the statement. We covered the teaching of controversial issues. And I think we could continue to discuss teaching of controversial issues. I'm one of the ones, or maybe the only one, who has an issue with the breadth and scope of the revision. I think we as a group should have the opportunity to discuss that in more detail. And that would be my recommendation, is that if we're allowed to continue, that's subject number one, to be able to discuss the statement on teaching of controversial issues. Because I think we as a community and teachers and administration deserve that opportunity. And the one reason I point that out is because it's very long, and every teacher has to be held accountable to that statement. The longer it is, compared to the original statement, which, as Roy said and showed you, was very concise, it gets more complex for the teachers to be accountable to a longer statement. So that's one reason I think the Superintendent's Advisory Committee could discuss this. I don't think we need to be in a hurry to come up with a revision. I think it's worth the time to discuss it. The other subject that, if you're wondering what other comes to mind, would be the Bronxville promise. And it's come up this evening that maybe there are some other additions or revisions to the Bronxville promise. I think that would be another role of the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. So I'm just pointing those two items out that are potential for continued discussion. And I think what we saw was people come and go from the committee, so it's not one locked-in group. And I think that's good because it engaged more people in the conversation in our community, those parents who are interested in being there. I think it was a good inflow and outflow of individuals who want to be engaged in this process. I think it's, in conclusion, I just think it's important that we look at this revision with the Superintendent's Advisory Committee as a body in which we can come to a good conclusion as we had worked through the other issues as well. We'll miss Roy's leadership, but Rachel would, I'm sure, be willing to, I would hope, continue in the footsteps of Roy, and we could probably somehow name this committee in memoriam or Roy.
Come on. Not dead yet.
A lot of years to go.
I hope so, Mickey.
So anyway, I hope that might be the case, and we're able to continue this as an honor to Roy, who came up with this idea in the first place. Thank you very much.
I'm going to take one moment to react to that quickly. I think, Don, your comment is, let's continue it. And I actually think that's a great idea. But you mentioned, look, this is a diverse committee, which I think in Bronxville terms, we should define as representative, which it wasn't. It was put together by a group of people initially who came to a meeting like this over a year ago, who responded to Dr. Kotke's DEI presentation. And that original group of 7 people formed that committee initially. And then you mentioned that it was inclusive, which it was not by any measure. There was no ability to join the committee unless you went through the administration. It wasn't open to anyone. So it was neither representative nor inclusive. But I agree with you, let's continue it, but let's make it representative and inclusive. I think those would be really good ideas. And while we're talking about facts for a second, that green language I want to come back to in the controversial topics point. If we were in fact, let's just say for a moment, what that language says is, look, if we define something as a controversial topic, we are allowed to debate it, and our teachers are then required to teach that controversial topic, even if it's false, is not based in fact, equally to our students. And let's just think about the events of the last couple of weeks where we had Kanye West being played in the background of an Instagram account. And thank you, Rosie, for saying what you just did, because I agree with you. We should be bold at times like this. I think it's incredibly important to recognize that if we don't put that green language in there, it means that we would have to teach the Holocaust potentially as a controversial topic, meaning that our teachers would have to give equal airtime to a Holocaust happening and not happening. So let's all just be very clear on where some of this is taking us, guys. And I want you all to really understand it. I've read this carefully. I've put now more hours, and I'm on many boards. I put 5 times as many hours into this board than any other board I'm on. And I will tell you that it is important that we continue discussion like this, but let's be very factual in our points. This was not a diverse committee. It was not representative. It was not inclusive. I do hope we create one like that. And I would love to be a supporter of that and then come up with what I believe to be representative and inclusive recommendations.
May I respond to that?
I think we've got to...
May I respond?
I'd like a chance to speak first.
Well, Mickey,
public comment time, it's not debate
responding
time.
to my comments.
Yeah, so the purpose of the public comment section is not for really debate. It's to express comments. So let's let another member of the public have a turn, Don, and then we can come back to you.
I just want to offer a different perspective. I was also on, sorry, I'm Elizabeth Raniwala. I have 2 children in the school. I have a 4th grader and a 2nd grader. And I have been on this committee, the Superintendent's Advisory Committee, since the beginning as well. And I just want to share a different perspective, and that my experience was quite different than yours was, partially because of what Mickey has pointed out, that I do not believe that I believe the advisory committee was created in an effort to bring us together and talk about things that are really hard to talk about in a constructive way. But because it was not, in my opinion, very inclusive or reflective of our community, the conversations were very difficult to have. And I actually want to speak to the point that you made, which I think was really important. It wasn't transparent either. We've had conversations about very, very important topics that our school community is not aware of. And I think what you spoke to is a perfect example. When we're not quick and transparent and clear about what we're talking about, rumors get started, conversations are being had that are not productive, and I just think it's really, really important that if this, my personal opinion is I do not think this should continue. We are not a group that's qualified to be talking about diversity, equity, inclusion because we are not diverse. And it is not reflective of the school community that I know of. But if we are going to continue to talk about these things, please, please, please let it be transparent and communicated to our school community so people can decide, they can know what's being discussed.
Thank you. Don, did you want to say something else?
I'll follow everybody else who wants to speak.
Would anyone else like to say something?
I would. I'm Aaron Schaefer. I have a daughter in school on the committee. I have no idea how people were selected to come, but people came and went. And so to me, that seemed like it was open. I heard a full spectrum of opinions and engaging conversation. So I guess part of the diversity is we're taking different things out of this. But again, I don't know how people were present in that room, how they got to be there. I don't know if anyone wanted to be there, was told they couldn't. Again, I don't know.
Oh,
You were told you
I
couldn't
believe
come.
this is the committee I've asked a few times to
Okay,
be on.
so I don't know. So, I mean,
That's not a singular experience, several.
okay, so there you go. I have no idea. But what was there did seem diverse and engaging, and so continue maybe with some changes to make it more inclusive so people can come and go. I don't know about those procedures, but. And then Nikki, just one thing, that what's a controversial issue? Absolutely, that's a concern, and I don't think anyone wants that. I think on the other side of that is shutting down topics that cannot be discussed. In the last few years, you couldn't discuss vaccines. You couldn't discuss the efficacy of masks. So like, things were shut down is like, that's not something that can even be engaged. So I think there's a balance of like, the ridiculous and then things not being discussed because people don't want to engage them and say that there's not facts to support that and it's not even up for discussion. So I think that's where it ended up in the green area. That's for you guys to decide.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Anyone else here in person? And we also have an opportunity online. Are there any?
Nothing's coming.
Nothing has come in. Yes.
Hi, I'm Holly Collier. I just wanted to thank all of you for speaking tonight. Thank you, Dr. Montesano, doing this greatly. And I just wanted to go back to a point that Vicky had raised earlier about creating some language around DEI within the Bronxville Promise, which I think is an excellent idea. A group of us went through, so Westchester County has 43 school districts, and we went through the board documents of all 43 school districts, and we discovered that 20 school districts have DEI policies. That's almost half. A further quarter are in strategic planning or information or in discussion, and the remaining quarter has nothing online, as far as we can tell. So my question to the board is, you don't have to answer this tonight, but we've missed the chance to be in the vanguard. Do we want to be a laggard in our peers?
Might I just respond to that? Something similar has come up with looking at our peers and how they've addressed this issue of DEI from the mandate from New York State and what's going on. But one of the things you have to consider is the Bronxville Promise does actually capture a lot of this, a lot about the values that we're trying to promote, or that the state was mandating and trying to promote in districts. And I would challenge you to actually look at those districts, each of those who adopted the DEI policies, and see if they have something similar to a Bronxville Promise within their district. And I suspect that they don't.
Pretty much everyone has a mission statement.
It's not true, actually.
Yeah.
That the emissions, I'm talking about the Bronxville Promise, okay? The Bronxville Promise and the values that are discussed within the Bronxville Promise. So I think that is something where it encapsulates a lot of these things that the DEI mandate is trying to promote.
Thank you, Holly. Anyone else? Unless there are no other speakers, just a few things I would add. There's clearly, first of all, to Rosie, I'd just like to say, and I know I speak for the board, that anti-Semitism has no place in Bronxville. And we hear you on communication, and it's a topic that we discuss pretty much every board meeting, not always in the public session. In the executive session is often when we're talking about these sensitive issues, and there is a healthy dialogue that's been ongoing about the right way to communicate, so we hear you. As far as the committee, thank you everyone for having the courage to express your reactions to how the committee functioned. I know there's some disagreement on how representative or inclusive the members of the committee were. I guess we can disagree on that. I would just like to point out that there was very much an intent for it to be representative. And so,
Susan, may I have the opportunity to respond? I'm sorry, I thought you were...
well, you did say that you wanted to
Yeah, I was gonna follow.
have another turn to speak. Sure.
If I could, thanks. I will keep it short. Nikki, you may be, or you may not be aware of who was in attendance. I mean, you know the names, you probably know all those names. There may be a couple that were not, that were representative of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I don't want to get into a discussion of that, but I think you're being totally and patently unfair to the committee that was formed by Roy. I think you needed to be there to see diversity in thought as well as a diversity in the people that were there. And there was inclusion. And I think you needed to be there to see it, to speak to it. So the fact is, it doesn't matter what you look like. What matters is the diversity of thought and the diversity of opinion. And we had that full spectrum. So I really think it's unfair to say that there was no diversity and no inclusion.
I'm sorry you feel that that you've
No,
been held
it's
to
not
on
a
something
feeling.
unfair. Done.
It's the reality. And you know, we had, again, 30 or 35 people from the community, and this was the first time, I think, Roy, that this had been done certainly in your tenure, to gather a representative body from the community. So for you to say it wasn't perfect, that's true. But to ask for it to be perfect, I think is an unreasonable request. And this body that was formed couldn't be 100 people in that room. It had to be limited to a certain size. But again, there was a good inflow and outflow on both sides. People left, people came in. So there was not a group that stayed static. We had new people join, and I think that was of value to the group. And I think what Roy put together is commendable, and it met the objectives, and I think he and the members of the committee deserve a lot of credit for what they did for teachers, for the administration, and for this community. I would also like to say that in terms of the Bronxville Promise, one other thing. You mentioned the Holocaust. Roy, and we talked about this at the last meeting, the Holocaust is off limits. That is not a controversial, we've mentioned that. So that is not a valid discussion item. It's not, I don't know how to phrase that, Roy, but anyway, it's off the table as a controversial subject.
Would you like me to read you the green language, Don?
No, I know what the
Would that
green
be
language
helpful?
says.
Okay,
But
good.
the Holocaust is not part of the equation. I'm just telling you, that
Okay.
was discussed.
Okay.
You brought it up, I'm telling you what was...
I'm understanding you've taken the Holocaust off the table, but the green language could include many other things of non-factual basis. So Don, thank you. Hey, look, thank you very much. I'm really glad you came, and I'm really glad you were part of it. I also think that the committee did a really nice job of hashing out some very tough topics. And I commend Roy for having done that, very much so, in fact. And I think that what I am saying is that not that we're going to get to perfect. Perfect doesn't exist, guys. But let's get to something representative and transparent. Let's get to something that does, in fact, bring in the views of, I think I saw 5 women and people in this room say I tried to be on the committee but couldn't in this room. I'm not going to have them hold up their hands. But let's try to, and you mentioned it. Look, I was responding to your point of this was so inclusive. It wasn't, Roy. I mean, I'm sorry, it wasn't, Don. And so let's.
How was it?
How was this not inclusive?
Wait, can I finish my comment?
Yes,
Mickey, I understand. It's all about definition. We're trying to define these terms, and it's difficult. Can I just mention one thing about the Bronxville Promise? I think Mike was right. The Bronxville Promise, I think, is what defines us as leaders in Westchester County. I don't know that anybody else has a mission statement, but they don't have.
The right commitment.
There are other,
Sure,
yeah.
there's one
There are lots of them.
So,
The
So-
Bronxville promise is what distinguishes us from many other, if not most other, districts in Westchester County, if not New York State. And the last thing I'll say is, and I'll end on this note, we ended up as the #1 district in New York State. That's the bottom line. What we're talking about right now is really kind of noise level. And I think Roy deserves a tremendous amount of credit. I don't know if that's been made public, but in terms of ending up as the #1 district, I think it's a tremendous accomplishment, and I don't want any of this to detract from what Roy has accomplished for all of us and our kids during his tenure over the last 5 years.
Thank you, Don. Okay, we have one more speaker.
Last year we did the international fair, and we saw how many parents actually are foreign. And my question actually, how many foreign parents were in this committee?
Well, there was one at my table, I believe.
Were there any non-white people on this committee?
Yes, there was one at my table. Yes, I would,
Of course there was.
I mean, yes.
so, I think the debate,
Can I just say, I think this just screams why we actually need to have a bigger and better
can you please identify?
discussion about DEI. Maybe not in this moment in time, but this conversation alone tells me that more needs to be done in our district to talk about these things. And I'm not trying to take a side on this, I can't believe this conversation.
We do.
To be honest with you. And it just says to me, we do need to do more work.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you. Yes, it is a process. We appreciate everyone's comments. We hear you. It is a conversation that should probably continue in some form, and we will determine that form as we go forward. So thank you, everyone.
It's good, I promise.
Okay.
I would just like to conclude the meeting that we all have a consensus that Roy Montesano rocks.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Jen. Please reach out to board members individually with any other residual comments that you leave this meeting with, and I would ask, if there are no further public comments, that we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.